I am a palliative care doctor and a supportive care doctor, and my job is really to help support people throughout the cancer journey. Start to finish, if you have a serious illness, palliative care teams are helpful. They help you live longer and they help you live better. And so our job was really to sort of redesign care so that became the default, so that everybody who had a serious illness got access to palliative care. And that doesn't happen now in most systems. In most systems, if you come into cancer care, you come into a disease silo. So if you have pancreatic cancer, you go to the GI clinic and they treat your pancreatic cancer, and then when somebody decides you're super sick and they can't give you any more chemotherapy, they send you to the palliative care people. And what we did was flip that entirely, because we feel like people need support across that whole journey. And it really does make a difference. We're getting data back now that show like there is something meaningfully different about the care that our patients get and the experience that they have. COVID changed everything. It changed everything in healthcare. In our little world, it was a national emergency, and like we stopped all of the things that we're doing. My skill set was incredibly important in the hospital because we didn't have tools to treat COVID. We didn't even understand it at first, but we knew that people were dying. And so most of my time got pulled into caring for people in the hospital and trying to make that less horrible than it was. And the impact on cancer care was really dramatic as well. People stopped getting screenings. And so now on the backside, where people are vaccinated, we're seeing all kinds of advanced disease that didn't get diagnosed in that dark period where people really didn't feel safe going for their annual mammogram. Another thing that happened was there was this wholesale shift of medicine to telehealth. Like, we had never had a way to pay for that. There was no mechanism by which like Medicare would pay for telehealth. And so there are lots of things that I felt the administration didn't handle especially well about the pandemic, but one of the things that they did that was massively impactful was they created a way to pay for telehealth. And it changed everything. My schedule became coming into the hospital before it was light and seeing sick and dying people all day long and trying to connect with families who couldn't come into the hospital to try to offer them comfort and support and help them make really hard and horrible decisions. And to make sure that patients were as comfortable as possible and that somebody was holding their hand when they died and that we treated them as humans. And it was awful. And I would do that all day, and then I would leave after it was dark again. Sorry.
You don't have to apologize.
I actually literally haven't cried in a year, and I might cry now. But I followed Twitter because it was the best place for us to learn what was happening in other places. Like, the doctors who were in Italy started putting out there what was happening there, and then we watched that move to New York. And here, we were doing 1,000 meetings a day trying to get ready. Like, our chief medical officers were just absolute administrative superheroes. Like, they changed all of the processes in the hospital overnight. And so I was following Twitter, and I had a Facebook account, but like Facebook, I was part of this group that was creating a memorial to healthcare workers that had died. And then it got into the hundreds. And then there was political stuff in my feed that I just couldn't see at that time. There was I just couldn't see people saying that it wasn't a real thing or that doctors were doing something other than trying to save people. And so I had to stop. And I quit watching the news, and I quit doing a lot of things except going to work and then going home and trying to not think about it. So our ICU, it really had amazing survival rates, but it didn't feel like that to me because every single person who died was a family that I interacted with on Zoom, which seemed crazy. If you had told me, like, you're gonna take care of families via Zoom, I would have been like, yeah, that's not actually possible. And yet somehow, if you committed yourself to trying to build a relationship, with families and committed yourself to really trying to find a way to support them, you could. And so this amazing thing happened where we were working a lot in telehealth, even in the hospital, trying to provide support. Early on in the pandemic, we didn't have enough protective gear. You know, we were wearing our little N95s for a week at a time. We would stick them in a little brown bag with our name on it, hang it up, and then we would come back the next day and make sure it still looked okay. And that was what we did. And so that is why, you know, during that same period, like I really thought I was gonna die. Like I really thought there was, you know, and then I'm seeing all this stuff on Facebook, which is why I quit. But I really thought that there was a reasonable likelihood that I wouldn't survive, you know? And I think a lot of us sort of felt that way. I redid my will. I made sure that my medical power of attorney was up to date, and I kept going. And then our institution was actually really aggressive about making sure we had PPE. So before too long, we had adequate protection. And then, quite honestly, it felt safer in the hospital than it did at the grocery store because at least here people were taking protection and protective steps very seriously.
Talk to me about going, you know, being a doctor and going out in public and people not taking it seriously and worrying about, you know, your well-being.
It was kind of heartbreaking. And, you know, at times when I wasn't coping as well, I just felt this rage about it. Like I felt this rage about having leadership in government who seemed to be responding to pressures that had nothing to do with protecting the populace. Like our ICU is overrun at times. We didn't have ICU beds. We had to open new floors that weren't ICUs and create ICUs because we ran out of ICU beds. We had people waiting in hallways for rooms. We had to open the convention center downtown at one point. My entire team is exhausted to the very soul of their selves. Like they are, and that manifests in different ways, right? Like that, you know, for some of us it means we buy a lottery ticket. For some of us it means like we can't come to work for a while. My profession is dependent on establishing an empathic relationship with people. And if you are exhausted to the very root of your person, you can't do that work. You can't walk in a room where people are suffering horribly and expose yourself to that. And that's what my work requires. I have to be able to walk in and try to offer help. And you can't do that. And so we will lose some people. They might be able to stay in medicine, but they won't be able to do what we do, I think. But I'm working really hard to try to heal our team. And, you know, if you have any thoughts on that, I don't think chickens are gonna do it. Not for everybody. I don't judge people who were like, yeah, that's not for me. I especially don't judge people who were older, and especially not at the beginning of the pandemic when we didn't know how it was transmitted. I think the thing that nobody ever got used to was the fact that we couldn't fix it. Like, we still don't have good medicine. All we can do is try to buy enough time for the body to heal itself, and sometimes it doesn't work. And that was the thing I think that was hardest, was that all of us had to in my career, we discovered that we could manage AIDS. You know, it was a death sentence when I was a younger person, and then they discovered that they could manage it, and now it's more like a chronic disease. I read about the 1918 pandemic. I had always thought that it would be different now. Those people probably, a lot of them died of post-influenza and pneumonia, and we could, it would be different now. We have better hospitals. It would be different now because things are different. We would handle it better. We know how to handle pandemics. I have a master's in public health. I went to a school where they told me from the moment I started my master's in public health that a pandemic would come. And I had a whole class on how to prepare for that. And it just made me crazy that none of that stuff happened. Like there was this complete abdication of guidance.
What was it like to get vaccinated?
Oh my God. It was the best day. It was like, I was so excited. And we got super early vaccines. I was vaccinated in like mid-December. You know, we were like on the, you know, we were the front line of the front lines. And so like, we were at the front of the line for the vaccine. It just felt like such a gift. Like it felt like this weight was lifted. Like I would be laying in bed and have a slight cough and be like, is this it? You know, like I would be like, is this how it starts? I'd climb the stairs and be vaguely short of breath and be like, is it starting? You know, like I was doing this like super paranoid monitoring of my physical function. And like you interpret a headache differently in that context. You interpret fatigue, like I was exhausted. Well, no kidding. You know, I was working ridiculous hours and when you do that for a really long time, fatigue builds up and it starts to feel like you're sick or something. And so like you know, once there were tests available, at some point I was so exhausted, I was like, this cannot be normal. And I went and got tested because I was like, I do not want to be like exposing people if this is not a normal fatigue. It was a normal fatigue. But like, I was super paranoid all the way through. I thought I was gonna die. And then like, that weight was, and I thought I might kill my family members, you know? Like I thought I might, you know, make Lynn sick or make my mom sick or, you know, my mom was in our little pod all the way along. And so like my biggest fear was that like I would take something to my 84-year-old mom. So one of the things that this whole experience just laid bare, especially here, was the inequities in our society that then drive disparities in health outcomes. Here, there were periods of time when none of the families that I interacted with in an entire day spoke English as a primary language. Here, our Hispanic population was disproportionately destroyed by this disease. Families lost multiple generations of people. It was horrible. Like, it's horrible enough to take care of a family that's grieving the person that they can't come see. They can't be there. They can't hold their hand. They can't tell them to hang in there. That's awful. That's horrible. But when it's the fourth family member that they've been through that with, I don't know how they kept going. The social justice considerations that underwrote how the pandemic unfolded and who it hit the hardest. That's a lesson that we need to learn from. That's a thing that like even the dullest of policymakers or thinkers should be able to look at that and go, oh, it matters if we provide people with primary care. Oh, it matters if we make sure kids have good nutrition. Oh, it matters. These things determine what happens to America in the next pandemic. I understand as a doctor that people are gonna, you know, in a pandemic will die because of the characteristics of the virus and the fact that we won't have good tools when it starts. But they shouldn't be dying because they have brown or black skin. They shouldn't be dying because they had to go to work that day. They shouldn't be dying because they had no access to primary care and they had uncontrolled blood pressure. That's what determined who died in this pandemic, and we can do better. America can do better than that.
Well, we started from scratch here. Our best friend lives next door, and this was a rough property that had nothing on it. You could barely walk through it. There were so many cedars.
656 to be exact.
Cedars.
I started coming out here every day after school with my chainsaw and just whittling away at a path so we could at least get my Jeep back here so we could even just walk around and see what was on it.
So we took a year, we cleared the property and planned the property for a year, and then we built.
My grandmother family is in South Texas, and they're farmers. And her name's Katie. She's a farmer's wife, and I always have thought of her as my guardian angel after she passed. She was just one of my favorite people, you know. And so I was coming out here every day after school with my chainsaw, putting myself in harm's way by myself in the middle of the woods.
Kay runs with scissors.
Yeah. And I started seeing this roadrunner. And this roadrunner was like, I'd look down and be like right next to me.
She would follow you.
And she would follow me all over the property. And they're typically kind of shy. I don't know if you're familiar with roadrunners, but anyway, she'd follow me all over the property. And I was like, oh my God, you know, and it was always when I had the chainsaw, I was like, this has got to be my guardian angel. And so I'm like, this is Katie. So I started calling her Katie Bird every time she'd show up. So we named our little farm Katie Bird Farm. So I taught middle school phys ed for 15 years, and then I taught middle school adapted phys ed, which is integrating the special needs kids into the PE classes. And I did that for 15 years. And that was a traveling job. So I was all over the city. I had 6 different campuses, and it was a great job, and it was really kind of fun to be, you know, I always say that when I was in my first 15 years at my first school, it was like Groundhog Day. You know, the same kid came around the same corner at the same time, you know, and it was just like everything was predictable. My lunch, my clothes, everything was predictable. And then when I started traveling and doing that, it was just like my whole world opened up with teaching and interacting with people, and it was just different.
You were really good at it.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a good job.
How did you end up with chickens? I guess we should probably transition.
Cut to the chase. See what I did there?
Yeah.
Well, when we moved out here and we had all this space, you know, it was just sort of a natural thing to, I mean, we wanted this to feel farmy,
to have a little
hobby farm. Mm-hmm. And that was the gateway, or the chickens. Little did we know, you know, they were the gateway drug to
other animals.
Everything else that we have.
Okay.
So we got this mobile chicken coop, and they delivered it, and it was like they couldn't get it through the gate with they had a big, huge flatbed. They said, well, we're just gonna have to drop it off at the gate. I'm like, well, okay, it's a mobile chicken coop, we can get it back there. So we had a little John Deere Gator, so we hooked it up to the Gator and we drove it back, put it into place. Mm-hmm. And anyway, we just kind of started creating this little space back here that we wanted to feel like an extension of our house, you know, because we spend so much time outside. I mean, like, I was outside probably, 10 hours yesterday.
Yeah, all the time.
And we love being out there with the animals. Well, next, we got donkeys, and two miniature Jerusalem donkeys. We got Pearl Snap, because she's got like a Pearl Snap button shirt. She's got a little white button nose, and Mineola. And Mineola was 3 months old when we got her, and Pearl Snap was 20. And we got them from a ranch, not too far from here, about 45 minutes. Julie did not want the donkeys at all. She put her foot down, no donkeys.
I wasn't.
And I begged and begged and begged, and since I know a little bit about
And then what?
Since I know a little bit about a teenage meltdown, since I taught middle school, I'm very skilled at how effective they can be. I threw one, and and then finally she just threw her hands up and said,
so we got donkeys.
She's like, okay. I mean, literally, I was like, you know, crying, and well, I'm 50 years old. I should be able to have whatever I want, you know.
Something like that.
It kind of went down like that.
And now we have them,
and now Julie loves them.
They're absolutely
part of our family,
lovely,
and
they're a real joy.
So he ended up, one of them, Mineola, who we called Tudor, because when she kicked, she tooted. And so we called her Tutor. And she kicked a lot.
Oh, on cue.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome.
So she was getting to be a little bit of a handful. I contacted the ranch owner and I said, look, here's the deal. We've had her for 5 years. I've given it my absolute heart and soul. I love this little donkey, but she's, we have friends out here that have kids and stuff, and we have to be really careful, I mean, it's livestock, right? So I said, do you have like an old gal, like, one of those gals out there that may know Pearl Snap, and we'll do an even Steven trade. You get a donkey that you can, breed, and we just want the old gal. And she said, I have the perfect one.
Yep.
And so it's only been, what, a year and a half? That's probably
right.
a year and a half that we've had, and we renamed her Pascua because we got on Easter
weekend.
And that's Easter in Spanish. And
So Pearl Snap and
so
Pascua.
they grew up together on this ranch, and they like never have a crossword. They're like
really sweet. They really work well together.
Yeah, and she is the absolute most, wouldn't you say, she's the absolute most loving donkey. I mean, she's
They're
just
sweet.
like a dog.
They're really sweet.
She's great.
I think Kay knew that they would be good therapy animals, and that
I needed
someday
therapy.
she would need therapy on a regular basis. And so here we are. And Kay spends a lot of time with the donkeys,
I spend a
so
lot
she
of
has
time
kind of her therapy hour every day. We got another batch of babies during the pandemic, and when you go and you can either get them like locally at kind of a
Tractor
farm
Supply, feed
store,
store.
a farm store, a feed store, or there's these online places. So I think I even remember the scene. I'm like in the kitchen, maybe fixing dinner. Kay is in the living room on her laptop studying what chickens we want to get, and I think she said, "Hey, let's get some ducks." I'm like, what? She's like, well, come here, look. And so on, if you will, on the chicken website where you can pick your chicks, they had ducks. And I'm like, well, and I think Kay had secretly been thinking about it and had not brought up the topic with me.
I had talked to a few friends about the ducks, and they're like, oh, okay,
Julie
I
will
don't think
never.
she's ever gonna
Julie
go
will
for that.
never
I'm
say
like,
yes.
Oh, I'm gonna.
So just for the record, my
Ease 'em
initial
in.
response was actually open and positive. I'm like, huh,
And it
interesting.
was. I was like, what?
Well, tell me more about that, right?
Yeah. Peace, love, and kindness were their names.
Yeah.
We lost Peace, and then during the pandemic, when we got the new group, who are now a little over a year, that's when we got 2 more ducks, and that's when we got Dolly Parton. She's got the big.
She has a hat.
She's a Polish. She's got the big,
She has
the big
this
hat.
big white hair.
And they're a riot. Ducks are an absolute riot.
Hilarious. They're messy and
They are
dirty.
so messy.
You learn that really fast, and they're hilarious. They make you laugh every day.
Yeah.
The big major storm in Texas was in February. We'll call it Frovid. And one of the problems with that was that the entire electrical grid for the state of Texas was completely compromised. Okay, so you know the story. So everyone's losing electricity. We've got snow and ice on everything. We had never experienced this ever before in Austin, and it was scary and dangerous. But we have chickens, including we had young chickens, and we had the donkeys and the ducks. Now the ducks, by the way, have a nice down jacket, okay? And they actually love the cold, and they were just fine for the storm. The donkeys are actually very sensitive to the cold, and so we had to set up space heaters for them on a generator because we kept losing electricity, and we happened to have a generator, which we were lucky because most people don't. The chickens, we were afraid of losing them.
We were going out every 2 hours and checking on them, breaking the ice on their water. And then I said, this is insane. Let's just bring them inside. I'm like, it'll be so much easier. And I even when I said it, I was like, wow, that's even a lot for me to say, right? And I'm up for anything.
And what did I say? I said.
And so I'm like, we've got some dog crates. Let's just put them in dog crates in the laundry room, and we'll put the baby ones in the shower. And Julie's like, okay. And so we gathered them all up, and I put pine pine shavings down in the shower and set them all up with a feeder
Our
and
nice
everything.
designer master shower became a bit of a chicken coop
brooder.
for about, what, 4 days
No, it was
maybe?
probably 5 at least.
It was a mess.
It was a mess, but I was cleaning it every day because
But it
I'm
was
pretty
awesome.
fastidious about keeping things clean
Yeah.
around here.
It worked.
And-
we barricaded rooms because
We've got the dogs and the cat. And
And-
they're like, what's that? You know, they were really curious about the sounds, and but it hands down was the way to go with the chickens. Now the ducks, that was funny because I would go out there and stress over them, and we had a heater on them, and then I would go break the ice in their big swimming tub for them to drink, and they would get in it.
They'd get in
and
it.
I'd be like, really?
Okay, they're fine.
I've just spent like hours trying to keep you warm, and you just got in, you know.
in Lake Superior.
14 degrees is too much in Texas for a donkey. They're just not acclimated for that.
Yeah.
And so, like Julie said, we had a generator. Never mind us needing electricity or anything. We put them on the
Yeah.
it on the donkeys
Yeah.
and had heat lamps on them.
We were
That's when
scooping
we had 'em
water out of the pool for
boiling water
boiling and
for all the animals.
and toilets and animals.
Yeah.
We had guests here because my sister and brother-in-law had been at the Texas coast.
They were en route back to Iowa, and they got stranded going to Iowa, so they came here. And thank goodness, you know, they're from Iowa, so they knew all about freezing stuff. So they
Yeah.
were a big help with all of our
So one of the best
problems.
memories is us having a candlelight dinner. We did have propane, so candlelight dinner. We made tacos on the stove. There's chickens chirping in the background in the house, and we're drinking wine, and
It felt kind of fun.
it was kind of
You know?
glamping.
But
a
it
little
was
bit.
it was such a crazy week. I mean, we were in motion, like every minute we were doing something. We were at the well pump with a blow dryer on the pipes there. You know, we were back and forth with the donkeys. I was so worried about the donkeys. It was just, we were getting up like at least once, maybe twice a night to refuel the generator
Yeah.
to keep the heat on them. But it was kind of like what we were talking about earlier about the therapy that animals bring, not just chickens, all animals, for me anyway. They absolutely 100% make the experience of living here, the chickens, the donkeys, the ducks, the dogs, the cat. They absolutely make the experience living here like so much richer. You know, just, it just feels, for me, I just love going out there and I'm like, this is our little farm. We've created this. You know, we've built all this
Yeah.
infrastructure, and we've moved in these buildings, and we've decorated them, and we've made this our space with them
We've
because it
created this
feels
little
good. You know, we
paradise.
want it to feel good out there.
And during the pandemic, we're like, oh, we have to stay home for a really, really
I know,
long time
we
and
really-
not go out. We're like,
we were like,
Oh.
we love our house.
Okay.
It wasn't like a.
We'll
I know
stay
that's.
home.
That, I don't want to say that lightly, because I know a lot of people really struggled during the pandemic
Yeah,
and
they did.
with mental health and everything. But fortunately, because of what we had created out here, we were able to really deal with it in a much healthier,
yeah.
happier way. We wanted to be outside gardening and doing the animals and, you know, interacting with all of this nature every single day, and we were able to do that, and it was just a blessing, really. A tragic thing happened in the pandemic. My mother's house of 38 years burned to the ground
Yeah.
in April. So that was, the pandemic started in March. Her house burned to the ground in April.
Yeah.
And so we had not been, my mom's 82 years old, and we had been very, very careful around my mother. And because she's got some health issues. And then all of a sudden it was just like, she was living with my sister for 2 weeks, she was living with us for 2 weeks, we had an extra dog, you know, we had an extra person. And it was a really very difficult time. But what was so nice about it was when she was out here, because she had been completely isolated in her house. I mean, we wouldn't let her go anywhere. We were even meeting her on the curb with our mask on. We weren't even interacting with her. And so once that happened, we were just thrown in together. And it was so awesome to have her out here. And we call them walkabouts. So we have walkabouts on the property, and we don't do it every night. Usually when it's cooler, we do it every night. We just walk around, and the dogs follow us, and the cat follows us all around. You know, we go through the donkeys and the chickens and check out all the plants and talk about everything what we want to do. And
it's very therapeutic.
Pull
it's
some
nice,
weeds. And
it's usually in the evening, so it's just kind of, it's a nice slow down of the day. And that's been a nice little coping mechanism for us all along, but definitely during the pandemic and
But
having
then when we had
here,
my mom here, we would take her with us, and you know, it was a slow stroll, and it was great, and it just felt really, it really helped it connect with her after not being able to be really around her.
She wanted to help with the animals too. She's
Yeah.
like, I want to help with the chickens.
She
You're like,
helped-
well, there's cleaning involved.
Yeah.
She's like,
okay. We have a long run down here below the property that we've added so the donkeys have more space to go around the whole property. They're not just confined to this little area. And she helped build little benches down there because I go sit down there with the donkeys all the time under the trees. And
She wanted to
Mom
help.
went and helped build the little benches down there, and that was really sweet.
our best
You
friend
know.
lives next door, and so she was part of our tight circle
Our
because we were all being equally really careful and really safe. And so we had our little tiny social circle.
We
do
have
dinners.
a gate, a pass-through gate between our properties.
Between
so
our two
we just
properties.
kinda- Our
We made it
signal,
work.
Our signal for when she's coming over or we're coming over is hootie, hootie. I can't say it all of a sudden. Hootie. That's our little call for each other.
Yeah,
like,
careful.
Like, are you naked in the pool? Hootie. You know, I'm coming over.
I'm coming over.
Like, give me 5 minutes.
By really eating at home all the time, we actually started losing some weight. And I know some people, it was just the opposite. It's like, I'm home, I'm making cookies and bread, lots of bread. And we actually did just the opposite. We leaned in.
That was a big change for us.
It was a big change for us.
I lost 35 pounds.
And I lost 25 pounds.
Yeah.
During the pandemic.
And we didn't give up. We really didn't give up the things that we loved.
We still drink alcohol.
Chips and salsa maybe, but you know, we just shifted a little bit.
We leaned into hitting a reset on our dietary habits, and it worked. And we needed a reset. We were getting soft, and
that's an understatement.
As hard
that's hence the hootie. Give me 5 minutes. I'm naked in the pool.
I think people go through this in various times in their lives where it's like, you know what? Let's hit the reset button a little bit. I want my diet to be, I want to be healthy. I want my diet to be good. I want to get, you know, maybe the drinking needs to be in check. Maybe I'm not drinking enough water. Maybe I'm not taking time for myself.
I don't have the moderation gene for anything, good or bad.
This is true.
If it's good for me, I go full on in good. If it's bad for me, I go full on in bad. There's like no middle ground. So that's been, you know, even like for me, it's really hard for me to stop out here. It's hard. It's hard for me to stop. It's hard for me to clean the chicken coop enough, or, you know, organize the shed the best, or you know, make the gardens perfect, or snip that one blade of grass that I missed with the lawnmower. You know, it's just like ongoing for me. And I mean, yeah, it's a blessing and a curse, really.
Are you going to say that you slowed down during the pandemic?
I don't think I was saying that.
Okay.
No. I think I probably.
No.
Yeah.
You didn't.
About a month ago, I went in to feed the chickens, and I saw the snake. It was real slow because it had eaten so many eggs. You could see the eggs in it. So my daughter was around with my grandson, and they opened the hatch so I could let it out because my daughter didn't want me to kill it. So fast forward a couple of weeks ago, I went to get an egg, and I opened the laying boxes, and there's this snake. You've seen the picture. And so it's probably the same snake, 6 foot, coiled up, trying to eat this one little egg. And it startled me for a second, but it didn't bother me. my daughter has taught me that the snake comes with the farm, you know, and she didn't want to dispose of it, so I let it have the egg and gathered the other eggs next to it. And you know, we've got a thing on this farm. We've had the indigenous people that lived here about 900 years ago. They've been gone, so they were on this farm. There's burial mounds next to this farm, and they excavated this farm back in 1923, and so we just treat this farm as one. You know, we're one with the land, and we want to honor their legacy that they left on this farm. And so, you know, I have a favorite band, Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, that has a song, Teach Your Children Well. And I think I have taught my children well because they teach me more than I've taught them about not just a predator that most chicken farmers would not want. It just came with the farm. It eats mice, that eat the feed, that feed the chickens. So it's just all one big yin-yang balance, you know, of life. You know, there's life, there's death, and that's part of the farm.
Like all of us, our lives got really small all of a sudden, right? Like all of a sudden it was us in this house. And that was great. That part of things, that was okay.
Yeah.
But that's how you know you picked the right person, because you're stuck in this house and like you can't go do any of the things you used to do or have friends over or you know, we had actually a relatively busy social schedule between concerts and shows and friend dates and all of this stuff, and then that just went away overnight.
I have a bad case of I can't say no-itis, and we really learned to prioritize, you know, the things that make us really happy, the people and the events, and that's something we've really held on to even after now that things are opening back up.
Tell me about these chickens.
She didn't say no.
Can't say no-itis.
So, you know, I don't know what prompted my sudden desire to be a chicken mom, right? Like, but I think it was like a combination of things. Like, first of all, there was no toilet paper, and God knew what was going to happen next. You know, I'm like, we need a food source. I struggled with like downtime. Like I needed to be doing something, and so I sort of conjured up this idea that we should get chickens, and I did that without like reading that other people were doing that. I did that without like really knowing very much, but a little bit of background is that I grew up on a farm, and I was a chicken farmer as a child. So like it wasn't really out of nowhere that I decided I was gonna have chickens. And so actually, Lynn wasn't super receptive the first time I pitched this idea. I probably didn't do a very good job of pitching it. So then instead, I pitched it to some of our friends who were way more receptive and then influenced Lynn. So that's how that went.
You so cheated.
I did
So
so
cheated.
cheat. No, I would say that I used what I had at my, you know, I used the tools we had. I grew up in Minnesota, and we had a 300-acre farm. So every summer we had chickens, and they were mostly chickens for our consumption. And then we had a separate sort of group of chickens who were egg producers. But I didn't mess with them. The job for the kids was you would get like these boxes of hundreds of chickens. We had a chicken house, and you would grow those chickens to adult chickens. And then we would ship them off to a place that was a long ways away, and then they would come back wrapped up in white paper. We had a chicken meat production, but like, you know, every summer we had 200 chickens to take care of. And so whichever kid was sort of, you know, in between 11 and 14, when you are old enough to be responsible about watering a chicken and not too old to go, oh, hell no, you were the chicken person.
So it was like March, everything's shutting down. April, everything's kind of in a panic. May,
Chickens.
yes. I was just like, I think I want to raise chickens. I was like, yeah, sure, you know, and I just kind of dismissed it, right? But then all of a sudden, like, we'd be going to bed and I'd look over and she's like on YouTube looking at all these channels and I'm like, oh my God, you're serious.
Or at least distracted. I discovered where one could get free plans to build a chicken house. There have to be like 900 of our chicken houses at least across the country because it's like the first one that comes up when you Google free plans for a chicken house. Just the first one that comes up. That's where I went. It looked
Path
pretty
of least
complicated.
resistance.
Yeah, path of least. It did look pretty complicated, but then you know I had a friend with a giant saw, and I thought, well, we could do that.
I don't really think I broke. I just don't think I really had a choice. It just started happening. It wasn't that I put my foot down and said, we're not going to do this. I just realized that as each day went on and the conversations with friends, it was like, no, she's serious. This is happening. We went out to this place and there's like, they have a chick room, which I think is, you know, fantastic.
I got her to go look at the baby chickens.
Yeah. When I started getting into it, I couldn't fathom that they would have like a house, right? And that they would stay in the house and then they would come out and just run around the yard. I was like, we live on a very busy street that feeds into an extremely busy street. And what are these chickens going to do? And so I convinced her that we needed a run, which required
was at least as big an undertaking and didn't have directions. And I'm not actually like a carpentry person. Like I decided because, you know, I could read that I would be able to work my way through building a chicken house. And it turned out that was true. But then I just kept building stuff, which I do think was actually very therapeutic because I would come home and I couldn't think about work and it would be like, you know, getting dark and I would be out there sawing things because that seemed like a better place to have my brain than anywhere else.
So you were intensely focused at work on helping other people, and then you took care of yourself by going back to what helped you as a kid.
Probably. That didn't occur to me until you just said it, but maybe there was some of that going on.
I would bill you $200 an hour.
Yeah, that's fine. But also, I did look at coops on Wayfair, and like they were really expensive. And at my very core, I'm a cheap person, so I thought it would be cheaper. Lesson learned: buy the damn coop on Wayfair if you're a cheap person. It's so much cheaper. But I now have a few power tools that I didn't have before, and yeah, some skills.
The real question is, are you happy?
Oh, I'm so happy. It was like, you know, some good things happened last year. That was probably one of the best ones, was like doing that whole thing together and like having it be a thing that was not just us, but like Lynn said, my family, when they were, you know, incorporated into our little pod at various times, also like all of them worked on it. I had prepared Lynn for a, you know, like only 50% of our chickens will get through the first couple of weeks. They're, you know, like my experience was these
babies.
I know, but
You told me that.
based on my prior chicken farming experience, they're not particularly hardy. And so like I went into it going like, yeah, half of them are gonna die. And so, so I went to the store to get them the first time and I came back with like more chickens than possibly we had negotiated for. Mm-hmm. And also had an order in for more.
She put some on layaway.
I did.
I was like, who does that?
I love having the chickens, but Lynn's a way better chicken mom than I am.
I love the chickens.
She loves the chickens.
I do. Watching them from little bitty, vulnerable, itty bitty babies and watching them go through, I mean, they go through their kind of ugly teen years too. I mean, they start putting in feathers really weird. I guess it's like chicken acne that happens. It's just all types of stuff. But having fed them, watered them, raised them, and so forth, like we even have a little call. If you call them, they come running up to you and feeding them out of your hand, and you know, sit there outside and they'll come sit in your lap. And I didn't know that they would be, I didn't realize they were that engaging, you know, and I didn't realize how intelligent they were and attached I've gotten to them.
You really have.
Yeah.
I'm kind of a farmer about it. She's definitely a pet owner. She like has 15 pets now.
We named them.
I have egg producers.
The very first thing I did was I couldn't understand how these chickens would sit up in our bathtub, you know, all day long and so forth. And I just wanted to watch them. So I mounted a little Nest indoor camera and had it live streaming. So while she's at the hospital and I'm over at my office, I could log in and see the little baby chicks go along. And so I'd tell my mom, she's like, I want that link. And then I'd tell my nieces and nephew and so forth. And next thing you know, like, this link has gone, you know, through our friend and family group, and people are watching from New Orleans and DC and Charlotte. And
we had it open in our workroom at work so that, like, you know, we're doing all this stuff and we have chickens peeping in the background. It was really cool.
Yeah, so all of her, you know, residents and fellows and so forth are, you know, I would see it as just kind of like, you know, some people used to show that fireplace camera or something like that. It was just the chicks were sitting there and just calming everybody. And I
Cam, right? They do
Yeah,
like
yeah,
puppy
it was
cam.
exactly that.
Yeah.
It was like our little chick cam.
Yeah, we had chick cam. The Nest camera footage also revealed a lot of things that, you know, because it's going 24 hours a day, we have a 10, 12-year-old lab named Sam, and she was, we couldn't find her one night, and then all of a sudden I heard this huge crashing, and she had gone up and jumped on top of the wire mesh of the little Gaylord box and was walking through. So from the view of the Nest camera, you see these paws and the chickens were just looking up. And it's a funny story now because no one got hurt, but we found out that Samantha was going up at night and
Fascinated by the chickens.
Fascinated by the chickens.
Working in the hospital and then building the coop were both activities that were all consuming. You know, it was like, in the hospital, I didn't have time to think about anything else. Like, we didn't even have time to go to the bathroom, you know, like, and also then you had to take all that stuff off. But then I would come home and I had all this, like, I just had to step totally away, and like sitting down and reading a book was not enough distraction. And so building a coop was all consuming. It was like the light to the dark that was happening in this other part of my life. So it was the life preserver to the big wave, I think. You know, that's how they fit in my world.
During that time, we all know you turn on the radio, you can't escape it. You turn on the TV, you can't escape it. You pick up the newspapers, and there was no COVID in that yard, around those chickens, around the planning and so forth. It was a quiet place that none of those interferences came in. And I think that was the most lovely part for me, is watching her completely, for a matter of minutes and hours, detached from what she'd experienced during the day.
Plus I was building something. Mm-hmm. Like, I shared how hard it is as a doctor to not have an effective treatment for something like this, right? And like, I discovered that a 45-degree angle is a 45-degree angle, and you know, like, and then if you put them together, it makes a 90-degree angle, and that's a square, you know, like so it was like this thing that was that I could control, and I was building this thing, and it was taking shape out in the yard, and like, even on a hard day, I could come home and look over there as I was coming up the driveway and be like, yeah, that's a right angle. You know, like, did that.
Yeah.
So it felt controllable and felt like it was building something in the face of like nothing else. I felt like I couldn't control anything else.